night. The croissants, the chocolate, the wine. 15-year-old Ruby had been in a mood. I am not being ungrateful. All I said is that the Parisians are pretty sniffy for people who can't even get air conditioning right. What's the big deal? Ruby had never done well in the heat from the time she was a baby. Her early years in Greenwich Village during the summer were a nightmare. Ruby begging to leave the playground, refusing to wear a hat, her fair cheeks flushed red, the stinging heat rash between her meaty toddler thighs. Next year, can we please go to the beach in July? Somewhere with air conditioning? Somewhere I'm not sweating through my clothes by noon? She lifted one arm and gestured angrily toward the sweat stain at her armpit. This blouse is ruined, Mom. It's brand new, and I won't find this silhouette in Los Angeles, and it's ruined. Okay. Julian had placed a placating hand on Ruby's shoulder. Let's find something cold to drink. He had winked at Flora then, a signal, reassuring her that they were on the same side. They both heard in that moment how much Ruby sounded like Margot. Silhouette, sniffy, not Ruby's vernacular. That Ruby loved, worshipped, Flora's best friend was a good thing. And it was no surprise that Margot, who had no children, and Ruby, who was an only child, were thick as thieves. The ruined blouse had been a gift from Margot, bought at a small boutique in the 6th, not a place Flora would ever deign to shop. Too expensive. Too intimidating. She and Margot had had a testy exchange about it at dinner in a tiny bistro the previous night, where they'd probably been a little too drunk, a little too loud. Margot and her husband David had taken Ruby for the afternoon and then reappeared laden with shopping bags. Ruby was bright-eyed and high-spirited and not complaining about the heat, for once. This is too much, Flora said, as Ruby opened bag after bag displaying her haul. The very sheer pink blouse, a pair of white gladiator sandals that Flora thought horrendous, a black scarf from some high-end designer covered with tiny skulls, a suede fringed handbag. Is this in style now? Flora said, running her fingers through the brown suede. Mom, Ruby said, obviously. Everything was impressive. Everything was expensive. Flora was annoyed at Ruby for accepting so much, while also realizing how stubborn Margot could be, wielding her generosity like a bludgeon. Here, take this, take it, take. Sometimes it was impossible to resist the force of her. It's nothing, Margot waved Flora off, tucking the shopping bags beneath their crowded table. Everything was on sale. David shrugged, his affable, agreeable self. What Margot wants. But Flora was already feeling sheepish about the apartment they were renting. As always, when traveling with Margot and David, it was obvious those two were covering most of the costs. There was no way Flora and Julian's half, the very reasonable figure Margot quoted as their share, was 50% of the spectacular, sprawling flat blocks from the Jardin du Luxembourg. Maybe she got it with miles, Julian said wryly when they were unpacking, referencing Margot's insistence that she would take care of everyone's plane tickets because she had airline miles she needed to use. That day in the airport in France, Flora didn't have the energy to argue with Julian over exchanging the currency they could have used for the cab fare from LAX to home or for takeout that night. She just wanted to keep the peace, get home, regain her daughter's attention, because if everyone was being honest, the real reason Flora was testy over the clothing purchases was 10 days of Ruby hanging on everything Margot said, mimicking her gestures, her intonation, even one night, jokingly, but also kind of accurately, calling her mon autre mère. Flora went downstairs and poured herself a cup of coffee, adding some almond creamer that Ruby had convinced her to use instead of half and half. Sorry, Mom, but at your age, dairy is basically poison. She looked out the living room window. It was early, the sun barely rising, turning the sky a watery Monet blue and backlighting the downtown skyline. Early June in Los Angeles. June gloom. A thick, low marine layer shrouded